The fact is, there is a deep divide within the Pakistani system, which I think is far more consequential than just the fact of civilians being under the, dismissed by the military.
So, in this week's Raja Mandala, you've looked at Pakistan again, and it's an interesting now post Imran Khan's resignation. One of the things you say in the column, which is interesting, is that this is not, there is a tendency, just because of patterns, to look at it as military intervening to get rid of a civilian government. How do you see this time being different?
Yeah, I think if you go by the familiar pattern, yes, the army withdrew support for Imran Khan. We all know that Imran Khan came to power with the blessings of the Pakistan army, which helped him win the election in 2018. He didn't get a majority, so they stitched together a coalition for him. And then in the last year and more, there've been steady expansion of differences from them. And a few months ago, where armies seem to have signaled, look, they're neutral, they're no longer going to support him in his fights with the opposition parties. That led to his downfall. But the important thing is, while this is a fact, there is a deeper structural thing that is unfolding, that there's really an intra-elite quarrel, a contestation, if you will, on some broad policy issues. It's not just, army doesn't like the face of Imran Khan anymore. It is a question of, look, what should be the relationship with the US? What should be the relationship? Because Imran Khan, for example, went ostentatiously to Moscow at the time of the Ukraine invasion, and he seemed to have been taking a set of positions which are not what the army chief had some other positions, which he made publicly. He can't accept invasion of Ukraine by Russia. On Afghanistan, where the kind of statements that Imran Khan issued saying, look, Afghans are breaking their slavery, or the way he mobilized the public opinion against the French ambassador, who was under charges of asking the demand that he be expelled because of the blasphemy issue in France. So on a series of issues where Imran seemed to be increasingly divergent from the broader preferences of the army. So there is a genuine policy difference on Afghanistan, on the US, on Saudi Arabia versus Turkey, on the question of going to the IMF, setting the house in order. So I think there are also real policy differences here. And I think what is interesting is Imran Khan has chosen a path of his own, which is different from the mainstream policies, and is willing to challenge the army in pursuit of his interests, whether he's doing it for opportunistic purposes or not. But the fact is, there is a deep divide within the Pakistani system, which I think is far more consequential than just the fact of civilians being under the, dismissed by the military. Because after all the liberals are hailing military's intervention. Well, traditionally they would have opposed, because I think Imran's policies have also disturbed a lot of people within the civilian sector.
So, one more question on the Pakistan army. One of the interesting points you raise in the column, which everyone should read, it is in the IndianExpress.com, and probably wherever you're watching this video in the description, is that two things. One is that the Pakistan army seems to have, at least prima facie, internal contradictions, because of the ISI chief's appointment, the General Amir's appointment, as well as rumors that Imran Khan was trying to get rid of General Bajwa. So are there the support for Imran, as well as maybe these things existed in the past as well, but not in this kind of sharp visibility? And the second thing is, do you think the sort of political halo above the free kind of position that the Pakistan army enjoyed is somewhat being challenged and dented by Imran Khan taking them on head on?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no question. I think we don't have the, kind of intelligence reports you need to assess how deep are the internal differences within the Pakistan army. But the fact that Imran was getting so cozy to Faiz Hamid, who was ISI chief, wanted him to be there, help him through with the political process, but Bajwa decided to transfer him out. So that's only one part, I think. There are some Pakistani journalists who are suggesting that, look, Imran would not have gone so bold to challenge the General Bajwa if he had not had some support from a section of the Pakistan army. That is, it is not that the Pakistan army is simply completely unified and what Bajwa says is the line. In the end, Bajwa prevailed. But the fact is, it won't be surprising if there were differences between them of how to deal with Imran Khan. And today, after the massive protests yesterday, on Sunday, in favor of Imran Khan, I mean, there will be people asking, was it a right policy to have sacked him? So therefore, I think from the beginning, a large section of the ISI, which actually built up Imran Khan, developed a lot of stakes for the army. So there will be questions whether what is the best way of dealing with him. I'm sure there will be divisions. There are divisions within the army, but at this point, we've seen reports that Bajwa, had told him that, look, the GHQ, the army headquarters is united and that he can't sack him and that he should go gracefully. But how long will that unity last? So I think that is the big question. I mean, I think all of us assume, look, Pakistan is an unchanging, simple mechanism. There is nothing in the world that does not change over a period of time. So I think Pakistan is going through a complex period. So it won't be surprising if some fault lines are beginning to creep into the armed forces as well, because Pakistan has difficult choices to make on economic policy, on foreign policy, on dealing with the terrorist organizations, on dealing with political Islam. So I think it would be surprising if everyone is simply say, look, the army chief decides everything. It doesn't happen like that.
For India, one of the interesting things you say is one of the perhaps, if not a good sign, certainly not a bad sign, is that India is not figured as the foreign hand or as a major player. That passing phrase which we've held on to, praising India, Imran praising India's neutral stance or independent foreign policy. How do you see now? The big question is this balance, as you point out in the column, between the China-Russia axis, the world. There are sharpening dividing lines now. There is a great power rivalry, and Pakistan has been fortunate or has managed to stay very close to the West, particularly the United States, and now more recently, brotherhood with China. How do you see which way should India hope? I mean, we may have limited influence, perhaps depending on which way Pakistan goes. Which way is better for us, for Pakistan to be? Which of these two sides?
I think the worst outcome for us is if Pakistan is drafted into a China-led regional alliance. Because already we have concerns about China's dominance over our frontiers. And if China completely dominates Pakistan, that will be the worst outcomes. But this is a very different position from traditionally, we've always objected to American influence in Pakistan. But today, I think the American influence is nothing compared to what China's influence on Pakistan in terms of the arms supplies. And this is where I think where Imran Khan, by mobilizing anti-American resentments, has helped Pakistan. And while Bajwa is saying, look, we need to reset relationship with the US, and Bajwa is not saying Pakistan should abandon China. He's saying there should be good relations with both. So what Bajwa is seeking is the traditional framework of Pakistan having good relations with both US and China. After all, Pakistan 50 years ago facilitated the normalization of relationship between US and China. And it was because US and China had very good relationship, and Pakistan had the benefit of a double whammy, if you will, both sides actually being nice to Pakistan, while we were aligned with Russia. But that structure has changed today, where within Pakistan, there is no agreement on how exactly to deal with the external world, because Imran is saying one thing, and a lot of popular support for him in his anti-American positions. Well, the army wants to restore the relationship with the US, which is what just even a few days ago, General Bajwa said this in a conference. He said, look, we want good relations with Pakistan, China, but we also want good relations with the US, and that I need more American equipment, and we would like to buy more American weapons, because Pakistan army was brought up on American weapons. So I think there is a division in terms of how to deal with the US. And this is where my sense is, you remember there was a lot of speculation when Imran Khan went to Moscow, that it was probably at the encouragement of China. Because I think in the past, Russia and Pakistan did not have much of a relationship. But the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a steady expansion of the relationship. So for China and Russia, to building a regional bloc of anti-American states, would be a valuable thing. And I think they would like to, draft in Iran or somebody else who have problems with the US into an Asian front. Unfortunately, fortunately for them, India is not there. India has good relations with the US these days, and even with all the difficulties on Ukraine. So I think for us, a Pakistan that gets swamped by China, because Russia is not the dominant, won't be the dominant player in Pakistan, but a Chinese dominance of Pakistan could turn out to be worse. So for us, the trick is to see, at least if Pakistan remains a neutral actor and is willing to engage all sides, just as we do, and avoids, taking more vigorous positions against us. So I think that is the challenge. It's not going to be easy, but I think that's what the main argument. Don't look at this in a very narrow prism, tomorrow there'll be improved relations or not, to one of actually the structure of South Asian geopolitics is shifting because of the contestation between US and Russia, US and Europe on one side, Russia, China on the other. And finally, within Pakistan, I think the internal politics of Pakistan were always linked to external politics. From the beginning, right from independence, they were very close to the West. If you go back to pre-independence period, Jinnah's Muslim League supported the British war effort while the Congress did not. And they were part of the Western alliance systems. And in the 80s, they joined the Muslim countries along with the West in opposing Soviet intervention of Afghanistan. So I think, and they always had this deep connection. While India, we really more self-referential, preoccupied, and the foreign policy is not so central to India. But in Pakistan case, the external thing was quite central. But today the problem for Pakistan is internally there is a fissure, a deep fissure, and that fissure must square up with the external fissures that have emerged.
Great, so thanks so much, everyone. Please read the column. We will be looking at, of course, foreign policy as in general and South Asia in particular in this case. Thank you so much, sir. See you next week.